start with you, Dick, if I may, just following on from some of your comments there towards the end of your presentation, in terms of how you think how you can see a future shipping companies or crews getting engaged with the industry. How do you see the crew of the future actually becoming enthralled with the future maritime industry?
That's quite a tough one, actually, because it's very seldom that we involve the crews in any of the debates that we have, and that's what I'm trying to get at. I don't have a solution to it, but I think if you look back at something like London International Shipping Week, of all the events I went to, I think there was one serving crew member who took the podium at one event, and was absolutely blew the audience away with her experience of what was actually going on out there. So I think we have to involve them a lot more, and we have to involve the young people through the colleges, through organisations like Young Ship, through whatever we can to get the next generation engaged and have some form of engagement at a much earlier level to see what this could look like. And I think it's implicit on everybody to bring the young leaders through of tomorrow and say, what is this thing going to look like? But I'm not sure how we achieve that.
How would you also think about you said in your presentation that you need to look at the training regime we've got under STCW is training for yesterday when we need to be thinking about the future. But as we see a whole range of different ship types, autonomous ships, high levels of digitization, what kind of training should we start thinking about then for the ship's crews in the future?
Well, that's exactly it. I personally believe that we should be training multidiscipline crews who are extremely tech savvy, because that's going to be the people who are going to operate the ships of not just tomorrow, but the ships that we're putting out there today. And the lag is the biggest problem, in the fact that the certification takes forever to catch up with what's happening. You just have to look at the introduction of ECDIS and the way that's received by some of the elder brethren in the industry, and yet we're all quite happy to use that in our cars. Same thing with autonomous cars that is happening on the roads, but we're really, really holding back from using them at sea. So it's a difficult one. It's a chicken and egg situation, but at some point we've got to start training and stopping, in my opinion, and it's only my humble opinion, is stop this oil and water and sort of specialist disciplines on board have to start melding into some sort of future operators or ship operators.
Well, did we not see the launch of this combined cadetship a few years ago, where youngsters would go at sea, not specifically focusing on just the deck or the engine room, but going for some sort of dual cadetship? That seemed to go to nowhere.
It did in our country, but I think the Dutch have done it very successfully. And one of the Dutch union representatives at one of the events in London was talking about that, and also talking about the fact that they don't just finish a cadetship, that they offer right through to the next stage to officer of the watch, and are guaranteed that once you're into that cadetship system, that you then will be guaranteed the next stage. And the training regime is far better, but it's multidisciplined as well. So I think there are lessons to be learned everywhere. I think it's going to take a lot of shaking up to make it happen.
But do you think essentially that we need to change our approach towards the crews so that they become seen as an asset, less of a operational cost that the operator, manager or owner needs to bear?
Absolutely so, and obviously Jeff from BP, BP is one example. They're training young people to be their leaders of tomorrow, but they're in a very fortunate position that they own and manage their own ships, and they do take people from school and right through to senior management and retirement, and it's a kind of cradle to grave scenario. I hate to use that phrase, but and those are few and far between now, and it used to be prevalent in the industry. it's quite rare in the industry now. So how do we get to the point where you're investing in crew members and not going to lose them after you've invested in them? And I think that
so retention is the key there. So retention happens when you've got a happy crew, when you've got that satisfaction, when they feel that they're part of that engagement with the company. Stephen Jones, when you began this Seafarers Happiness Index or survey, did you expect to find particular results? Really, some of their preconditions. And secondly, are you seeing a difference between ship types or a difference between nationalities, types of companies?
I think the first question on whether there's any kind of preconceived ideas, I suppose, given the kind of talk in the industry and concerns about issues of recruitment and retention, there was probably a sense that maybe the results wouldn't be as happy as we would like them to have been, because that's been the talk for so long, that, you know, seafarers are no longer enjoying their job, and issues such as shore leave are being eroded, and work pressures, paperwork, fatigue. So I think there was a kind of slightly looking through your fingers as the responses came in, but in the whole, everything has been quite, even to negatives, quite a positive kind of stoic response from seafarers, that, you know, identifying problems, saying what the problems are, and wanting to be part of the solution. So I think there's definitely been positives to come from any of the negatives. As to various vessel types, there's been a sense, certainly from the written responses that we receive. So in essence, we ask the questions, it produces the data, you know, how happy are people out of 10, 6 or 7 or whatever the numbers come. But actually, it's the written responses that really have the massive value as we look to analyse and learn the lessons that seafarers are sharing. And the lessons are probably not rocket science, that those that work for, we could probably all list a number of ship owners that we would perceive as being good, and that translates very much into the experiences of seafarers. So when they work for companies that respect them and invest in them and really do genuinely look to embrace them as an asset rather than a cost, then they're the happier seafarers.
Jeff, I'm going to turn to you now, if I may. You were talking in your presentation about this, and it was referenced by Dick there, that cradle to grave almost sort of a nurturing of the cadets, so you get the captain or the chief engineer that you want. You've got the right kind of person there. As we see technology evolve, as we see new systems develop, and this sense of autonomy, digitalization, a lot of data off the ship and onto the ship, how are you changing? I know you referenced that you review your training, but how do you adapt to this change of technology?
So I think the key word for us in BP is we're going through a modernization stage, and many companies around the world are doing as well. I mean, today is the slowest day of the rest of our lives, right, when you think about technology. And you know, if we look at where we get our cadets, the schools are advancing their programs. Some of the cadets that I've had the pleasure of being at in our induction process have been absolutely outstanding folks, but you know, their skill set is slightly different than when I did it, say, 30 years ago. So I mean, we definitely have to embrace the future, as both Dick and Stephen have said, but yeah, we don't turn a blind eye to it. Our systems are being modernized, our people are being modernized, and if we don't, we will be left behind.
The people are being modernized. If you were going to give a tip to any of your competitors, well, not even competitors, in different sectors, 2 words, 2 magic words that will make owners change their approach to crew and think about them as an asset, what 2 words do you think, Jeff, would sort of sum up that mind shift?
2 words, well, safety. I think if we care about people and we treat everybody well, you know, safety pays itself back in spades as far as how a company succeeds. And then the future, if you look at the future, you know, the welfare of your crew is actually another way to look at the welfare of your company moving forward. You know, people make the world go around, and if we take care of our people and we make sure they're safe, you're paid back in spades with hopefully success.
We came across the idea that companies are increasing the amount of data that they get off of the ships, the amount of communication that they allow on the ships. One of the comments that's come in on the chat board here suggests that, like the dry bulk sector, 300 kilobytes and no attachments is what the crew are allowed. For them, an idea of online is utopia. Is there still that demand, Stephen, for increased connectivity? Has it really? I hear from a lot of companies that there is increased connectivity, that crews are able to engage with their family and friends at home. But is that a reality?
I think there's very much a two-tier kind of industry emerging in this connectivity kind of realm, and that's a massive concern, certainly on the responses to the happiness index. Those that are connected and feel that sense of being able to talk with home and friends and feeling part of the wider society, they're quite happy. The ones who don't are extremely unhappy. There's real dissatisfaction when they're not connected. I mean, some of the arguments against connectivity I've been quite amazed at, and there's one of the major P&I clubs that's talked a lot about their concerns about social isolation because of connectivity, and the fact that they're concerned about how seafarers will deal with bad news if they're connected. And that just depresses me so much, because the idea that it's being connected that's actually causing the problems, I feel is totally wrong. We've eroded crew numbers to such an extent that that's why people go back to their cabins and close the door, because there's no life, no soul left on many vessels these days. So to me, connectivity is a fundamental, and I think the demand for it from new seafarers joining the industry is growing exponentially, and ignoring it is a major, major mistake.
Jeff, turning to you with the same sort of comment there, is that something that you're acutely aware of at BP when it comes to your crew's welfare?
No, absolutely, and we've taken steps to ensure that the sailors of today are as connected as they can expect to be. Some things we've done in BP: daily free internet allowance to the crews. We have free telephone calls allowed daily to the crews. And then there's all the other husbandry and health and welfare issues that we supply. For instance, a young fleet today, we just finished building 32 ships with all the latest and high-tech equipment. But you're right, there are fewer people on board, it seems, across the world. We still man at levels that we think, one, drive safety, but we see people that are happy with the staffing levels we have. One other thing that probably hasn't been raised is with the fleet of tomorrow, and it's a much more international crew. One thing we've done that we've seen a need and that some should consider would be that we have dedicated catering superintendents that monitor and visit vessels to monitor the quality of the food and how the crews are like the food that we serve. So I mean, it's the food, it's the connectivity, it's the facilities we have on board that seem to make life at sea better, and at the end of the day, I think better means that we're all successful and safer.
And how do you go about addressing these technology changes as well in terms of the training and the knowledge? You've got the regulatory requirements that you have under STCW for putting seafarers onto your ships, but Dick alluded to the electrical engineer, the sort of the person that would be required in the future to have an understanding of the sort of digitization processes and systems that may be on a ship. Do you think that is something that you need to think about as a ship owner and operator in terms of what the skill sets are going to be needed on the ship? And I'm not suggesting, as Dick said, that you should be employing people that are going to become astronauts, but somewhere there needs to be that sort of awareness of the skill sets needed.
Absolutely, and a great example is the new build project that we've been going through for the last several years. We've always trained people on OEM equipment as built, but today's OEM equipment is quite high tech, and I'll agree that we have to address the training prior to taking these vessels out. electrical engineering is one focus that we have because today's ships are much different than others than years past. So I guess I can just say I agree with you, but I think it's because the OEM equipment changes. We need to mandate how we train folks to keep up with the changes.
I know the OEMs do have their own training courses, etc., available for some of their equipment. But Dick, if I turn back to you now, please, on the regulatory side of things here. You mentioned that the regulations change at a very slow pace. We've seen amendments to STCW, not a complete rewrite. Do you think it's time then to consider addressing STCW whole scale to look at how that fits into the shipping environment of tomorrow?
Yes, and I'd love to sit here and say that that's absolutely achievable and we can go off and do it. I think the difficulty is for the industry to understand just how unwieldy IMO can be, and all of us flag states are a part of that. And it's really difficult to try and understand how we could possibly start that process now and arrive at something in 5 years or 10 years time. It takes so long, but I would love to see that nugget, just a little kernel, just start about what we're actually doing, because we can only ever use compliance to make sure that we've got the right people on board at the moment. But like I said, there's so much of a lag in it that the guys that we're sending on board now and the certification they have is quite outdated. So yeah, I would love to see it. I just don't know how we're going to achieve it. And only by lobbying IMO through Seafarers representatives organisations and good owners and International Chamber of Shipping, etc., can we start that ball rolling.
We're going to come to a close of the webinar in a few minutes, but I just want to get your thoughts, see whether you're positive or a bit sort of negative maybe about the future. Stephen, do you see that we're on the right road to engaging crews with the level of connectivity and technology and systems that we have or are likely to have if we look at the videos from some of the OEMs that we're likely to have in the future?
I think we're starting to talk in the right ways and starting to wake up to those kind of concerns and issues. To me, the issue of autonomous ships is a really fascinating one, because I think for centuries we had basically autonomous ships. They were just autonomous from the company. They had people on board and they were sent off to go and do a job. And basically, as long as they came back and did the job and paid the money in, then that was it. There was an autonomous element of that. And seafarers had the pride and passion and skills to reflect that. And I guess in some ways, we have eroded that slightly. In fact, competence itself, it literally does not imply excellence. And I suppose it's very hard for us to reward and recognize seafarers who are excellent when most of the industry, unfortunately, inevitably rests on the lowest common denominator of competency. I think we're making the right strides, we're talking in the right way, but there's a lot to do, and whether we'll run out of time to do it.
So the one question, Stephen, pop in. Do you think the IMO should make mandatory free internet service available for crews? Would that help?
Well, I mean, as Dick said, it's very hard to get legislation about the things that people should be looking at, let alone kind of, I think one of the comments was about a utopia. Yes, it would be fantastic, but it still feels a long, long way off from that. I think there's a few more hurdles to get over. I think we've constantly had a bit of a law of unintended consequences when we've maybe reduced crew numbers, taken away pursers and radio officers and all the rest of it, which perhaps from a technical perspective was understandable. But actually the gaps in the social kind of cohesion, the kind of family on board, they've led to these symptoms that we now have of social isolation, loneliness, fatigue. So there's so much to do. Connectivity is a major important part of that, but it's only one kind of pillar in the various responses that we need.
Jeff, if I could turn to you again with the same sort of question, that collision between the crewing requirements that you have on a ship and the technology and the autonomy, unmanned ships. I'm not suggesting that BP tankers are going to be unmanned anytime soon. But do you think we're on the right road?
So I think it's a definite challenge, and from an industry perspective, I don't think I can say. I think here in BP we're really trying to tackle the problems. We recognize them, and hopefully, a lot of these things that can't be mandated in IMO, as some have suggested, are what actually separate good companies from great companies, or even from the poorer companies out there that operate. And at the end of the day, those that are good and great companies will succeed, and it's these things that matter in the commercial market.
Good. And Dick, I'll leave the last word with you, if I may. Do you expect there to be a much stronger debate about crew welfare and about how we can maximise their value within a shipping company or a ship manager's function?
I'm positive that, and I think the title of this, "Asset Not a Cost," is the key to it. That's how we need to start thinking about it as an industry. Little steps I'd like to see is that everybody brings the young entrepreneurs through, and every meeting we go to, let's bring somebody who's not of my age to the events, and then we can generate the buzz around the industry. I'm in the schools quite a lot, and I'm promoting this industry. I've got 2 teenage daughters. I know that if they're not connected, it's the end of the world. We can't book a holiday apartment without them being connected. So we need to bring these young people through and just make sure that we do think of them as an asset and not a cost. And I'm positive about it.